Kevin Stefanski didn't just answer a reporter's question, he exploded. In a press conference that should have been routine, the Cleveland Browns head coach lost his cool when someone dared to bring up the name on everyone's mind, Shedeur Sanders. With a sharp tone and a dismissive, almost mocking, "Surely you can't be serious," Stefanski silenced the entire room. The message was clear: don't question him about his quarterbacks. But here's the problem. That one outburst may have revealed more about the Browns' chaos under center than any carefully scripted statement ever could. Think about it. Coaches lose their temper sometimes, sure, but when a head coach cracks in front of cameras over what should have been a harmless question, it usually means there's pressure boiling beneath the surface. And in Cleveland, that pressure is all about one thing: who's really going to be the quarterback of the future? Now, Browns fans have been here before. Year after year, this team seems stuck in the same endless loop: big promises, shaky leadership, and a quarterback carousel spinning faster than anyone can follow. But this time, it's different, because sitting on their roster right now is Shedeur Sanders, one of the most talked about prospects of his class. A guy with the pedigree, the talent, and the spotlight. Yet, for some reason, he hasn't been given a single real shot to prove himself. That's why Stefanski's meltdown wasn't just about a testy exchange with the media. It was about the elephant in the room. Why hasn't Shedeur been given first-team reps? Why does it feel like he's being pushed to the side, while other rookies around the league are already commanding huddles with starters? And most importantly, is this really about player development, or is there something deeper going on here? Because if you've been paying attention, the signs are impossible to ignore. Stefanski's comments, the owner's backhanded admissions about the draft, the way Shedeur was handled in preseason, all of it paints a picture that Browns fans are starting to question. Is Shedeur Sanders being set up to fail before his career even begins? That's the kind of question no coach wants to face in front of cameras. But it's exactly why Stefanski's defensive reaction matters. It exposed a truth that the Browns have been trying to keep quiet. Their quarterback situation isn't just uncertain, it's volatile. And here's the kicker: this isn't just about one preseason game or one angry press conference. This could shape the future of the franchise. If Stefanski mishandles this, he's not just risking one rookie's career. He's risking his own job, the Browns' long-term stability, and possibly the patience of a fan base that has been begging for a real franchise quarterback for decades. So, buckle up. Because what started as a simple press conference question just blew the lid off Cleveland's biggest drama. And what happens next could shock the entire NFL. The scene looked ordinary at first. A standard Cleveland Browns press conference. Cameras rolling, reporters scribbling notes, Kevin Stefanski at the podium trying to give his usual polished coach speak. Nothing out of the ordinary until one reporter asked the question that shifted the entire room. "Coach, how concerned are you about your quarterback situation, especially with Shedeur Sanders in the mix?" Now, for most coaches, that's a softball, a chance to say something neutral like, "We believe in all our guys," or "It's a competition, everyone's working hard." But Stefanski didn't go that route. Instead, he snapped. His face tightened, his voice cut sharp, and he fired back with a mocking, "Surely you can't be serious." The room fell silent. Not a chuckle, not a follow-up. Just the awkward kind of silence you only hear when everyone realizes something just broke through the surface. That one dismissive line told fans, reporters, and even players more than Stefanski probably intended. He's feeling the pressure, and it's centered directly on Shedeur Sanders. Here's why that moment mattered. Coaches at the NFL level are masters of public control. They've been trained to give non-answers, to deflect, to keep the spotlight off controversies. But when Stefanski cracked, even for just a few seconds, he exposed the tension that's been simmering all off-season. This wasn't about one rookie quarterback. This was about a coach fighting to keep control of a locker room, a roster, and maybe even his own job. And it wasn't just the words, it was the tone. That "surely you can't be serious" wasn't playful or lighthearted. It was sharp, almost defensive, the kind of reaction that comes when a question cuts too close to the truth. Reporters noticed, fans noticed, and by the time the clip hit social media, the narrative had already taken off. Stefanski isn't just brushing off the Shedeur Sanders debate, he's rattled by it. Why does this matter so much? Because outbursts like this don't happen in a vacuum. They happen when coaches know their decisions are under a microscope. They happen when there's real debate behind closed doors. And in Cleveland, the quarterback conversation isn't just noise, it's the central storyline of the entire season. Stefanski may have thought he shut down the question with that snide response, but in reality, he poured gasoline on the fire. Instead of calming speculation, he made it worse. Fans are now asking, if Shedeur really isn't a threat, why get so defensive? If the depth chart is truly set, why snap at a harmless question? The truth is simple. That press conference wasn't about controlling the message. It was a glimpse into a coach losing control of the narrative. And for Browns fans, it was the first sign that their quarterback situation may be far more chaotic than anyone realized. But here's the thing, what we saw at the podium was only the beginning. Behind the scenes, the Browns' quarterback room was already spiraling into confusion, tension, and controversy. And that's where the real drama begins. If there's one thing the Cleveland Browns are famous for, it's quarterback drama. This team has cycled through more QBs than most franchises have had coordinators. And now, even with a mix of veterans and rookies on the roster, it feels like the Browns are right back in the same storm they've been trapped in for decades. Let's lay it out. At the top of the depth chart, you've got Joe Flacco, a 40-year-old veteran who, let's be honest, is more of a temporary band-aid than a long-term solution. He's there to steady the ship, not to lead the Browns into the future. Then you've got Dillon Gabriel, a rookie with flashes of potential but far from proven. Behind him, Kenny Pickett dealing with injuries, trying to stay relevant, but hardly the kind of guy you'd pin your entire season on. And buried beneath all of them, Shedeur Sanders. That's the shocking part. Sanders, the rookie with first-round pedigree who somehow slid to the 5th round, is stuck at the very bottom of this crowded quarterback room. On paper, you'd think he'd at least be getting a fair look. But according to reports and what fans have seen with their own eyes, that hasn't been the case. While other rookie quarterbacks across the league are getting first-team reps and preseason opportunities, Sanders has been relegated to mop-up duty with 3rd and 4th stringers. This isn't just confusing, it's suspicious. Because the Browns aren't exactly a team with quarterback security. Their so-called franchise guy is sitting in the background with a contract that eats up massive cap space, but who knows if he'll even play meaningful football again. Flacco is a temporary patch. Gabriel is an unknown. Pickett is unreliable. By any logic, Sanders should be one of the top development priorities. Instead, he's been treated like an afterthought. That's what makes this quarterback room so chaotic. It isn't just about talent, it's about politics. You've got a head coach in Kevin Stefanski whose job depends on finding a long-term solution, but he's acting like Sanders doesn't exist. You've got an owner in Jimmy Haslam who admitted they didn't even plan to draft Sanders until the last minute. And you've got a fan base watching all of this unfold and wondering why the most exciting young quarterback on the roster is being buried alive on the depth chart. And here's where it gets even worse. Chaos like this doesn't stay hidden. It spreads. It leaks into the locker room. Veterans start whispering. Reporters start speculating. And soon, what should have been a straightforward competition turns into the NFL's newest soap opera. The Browns' quarterback room isn't just crowded, it's combustible. Every decision Stefanski makes from here on out is going to be questioned. Every snap Sanders doesn't get will be dissected. And every stumble by Flacco or Gabriel will only make the calls for Sanders louder. The press conference showed the cracks. But the depth chart? That's where the real chaos is boiling over. And it all started long before Sanders even stepped onto the practice field. It started on draft night, when Cleveland made a decision they weren't even planning to make, and sent shockwaves through their own franchise. On draft night, Shedeur Sanders was supposed to walk across that stage as a first-round pick. For months, analysts called him one of the most polished prospects in his class, a quarterback with pedigree, accuracy, and leadership qualities scouts drool over. But instead of hearing his name early, fans sat stunned as he slid and kept sliding until the 5th round. Pick 144. How does a quarterback with that kind of resume fall so far? That's the question that's haunted Browns fans since the moment his name was called. The answer lies in the whispers. Some insiders suggested teams were spooked by his mechanics, others claimed he relied too heavily on mobility, and still others pointed to personality, saying Sanders was too confident, too outspoken, too tied to the spotlight. But let's be real. Plenty of quarterbacks come with flaws. Plenty walk into the draft with questions. And still, when the talent is undeniable, they don't drop 4 rounds. Something else was going on here. That something else might have been the Cleveland Browns themselves. Owner Jimmy Haslam openly admitted they had no intention of drafting Shedeur. His words were almost shocking in their bluntness. If you told me Friday night we'd be picking Sanders, I would have said no chance. Translation? Sanders wasn't part of their plan. They only grabbed him because, according to their analytics team, the value was too good to pass up. That sounds harmless on the surface, but in reality, it's a massive red flag. Drafting a player you don't even want means you're already walking into the relationship half committed. It means the coaching staff might not have been on board, that the front office made the call while the guy responsible for developing him, Kevin Stefanski, was left with a quarterback he never asked for. And if Stefanski wasn't bought in from day one, that explains a lot about what we've seen since. The limited reps, the dismissive tone in press conferences, the insistence on keeping Sanders buried on the depth chart even after flashes of brilliance. Because when a coach feels like a player was forced on him, the leash is shorter, the patience thinner, and the opportunities fewer. It also raises the question, was Sanders' fall really about his talent? Or was it about perception, politics, and fit? Rumors swirled that some teams didn't want the extra baggage of drafting a quarterback with Deion Sanders as his father. They worried about media attention, spotlight pressure, and whether Shedeur could carve out his own identity. Fair or not, those whispers stuck. So instead of being embraced as a future face of the franchise, Shedeur entered Cleveland as the last-minute pick. A luxury. A gamble. A name that sounded good on paper, but wasn't really in the long-term plan. And that's why the draft itself wasn't just surprising, it was a warning. A warning that Sanders was stepping into a situation where he wasn't fully wanted. A warning that his fight for respect would be uphill from the very beginning. And as soon as training camp began, those warnings became reality. Training camp is where rookies make their mark. It's the moment to prove you belong, to show the coaches and veterans that you're more than a draft pick, you're the future. For Shedeur Sanders, this was supposed to be his stage. Instead, it became the first sign that Cleveland wasn't giving him a fair shot. From day one, reports out of Berea painted a clear picture. While veterans like Joe Flacco were getting endless reps with the first-team offense, Sanders was stuck on the sidelines. Even Dillon Gabriel, another rookie, was being worked into the rotation with far more opportunities. But Sanders? He was running plays with practice squad receivers, often against defensive backs who had little chance of making the final roster. It wasn't just a developmental plan, it felt like deliberate isolation. Fans noticed, media noticed. Clips circulated online of Sanders standing with his helmet off during scrimmages, watching from the background while quarterbacks ahead of him got valuable game speed experience. Every time a beat reporter asked Stefanski why Sanders wasn't seeing more action, the response was vague. We're bringing him along slowly. But slowly turned into sparingly. Sparingly turned into barely at all. And here's the kicker. When Sanders did get snaps, he showed flashes. In one camp session, he fired a tight window throw that drew audible gasps from teammates on the sideline. In another, he dropped a perfect deep ball that had fans buzzing. Yet, instead of building momentum, those highlights were treated like accidents. The coaching staff shrugged them off, sticking to the same narrative. He wasn't ready. That's when the whispers started. Was this really about Sanders not being prepared, or was it about politics? Some speculated Stefanski was protecting his job by leaning on veterans' safer choices in the short term. Others suggested the coaching staff was never on board with Sanders in the first place, and this was their way of proving a point. Either way, the message was clear. Talent alone wasn't going to move him up the depth chart. The situation reached its most frustrating moment during preseason game planning. Most rookie quarterbacks, especially those with name recognition, get at least a quarter, sometimes even a half, to show what they can do. Sanders? He was given scraps. A drive here, a series there, often with the lowest-ranked offensive line protecting him. It's the kind of setup almost designed to fail. And still, even in those moments, he delivered flashes, scrambling to extend plays, zipping throws through tight coverage, giving fans just enough to wonder what he could do with real weapons around him. But those questions were ignored. Instead, Stefanski doubled down on veterans, leaving Sanders stuck at the bottom. Training camp wasn't supposed to bury Sanders, it was supposed to elevate him. Instead, it highlighted the disconnect between what fans saw a young quarterback with star potential and what the coaching staff insisted. A project, an afterthought, someone who needed more time. But as the preseason rolled on, the cracks widened. And it wasn't just fans pushing back anymore, it was the national media. Every rookie quarterback gets that one game, the showcase. The night where the coaching staff hands them the reins, lets them prove what they can do, and gives fans a glimpse of the future. For Shedeur Sanders, that game never came. Instead, what he got looked less like a showcase and more like sabotage. It happened during a preseason matchup that should have been his chance to shine. Fans were buzzing, reporters were primed, and even social media was hyping it up. But when Sanders finally stepped onto the field, the setup was stacked against him from the start. Instead of playing with the first or even second string offense, Sanders was surrounded by practice squad players fighting for roster spots. The offensive line in front of him? Leaky, disorganized, and overmatched. His receivers? Dropping passes, running sloppy routes, and failing to separate. The result? Sanders spent more time running for his life than showing off his arm talent. He was sacked multiple times, flushed from the pocket on nearly every dropback, and forced into desperate throws that anyone could see weren't his fault. Yet when the game ended, the headlines didn't talk about the protection failures or the lack of support. They focused on Sanders' inconsistency. And here's where it gets really suspicious. Other rookie quarterbacks around the league were given carefully structured opportunities. Coaches dialed up safe throws, play-action rollouts, and easy completions to build confidence. Sanders? He was thrown into the fire with a stripped-down playbook and almost no designed rhythm plays. It was like the Browns were setting him up to fail, and fans saw it too. On talk radio the next morning, callers flooded the lines, accusing Stefanski of deliberately minimizing Sanders' chances. Social media lit up with slow-motion clips of receivers dropping perfect passes from Sanders, paired with captions like, "How's he supposed to succeed with this?" Even neutral analysts started asking why the Browns were treating their most intriguing rookie like an afterthought. The most telling part came during Stefanski's post-game press conference. When asked about Sanders' performance, his answer was sharp and dismissive. "He's got a lot to learn, we're not rushing him. No mention of the protection issues. No acknowledgement of the dropped balls. Just a narrative that painted Sanders as unprepared." For many, that was the breaking point. It no longer felt like cautious development. It felt like intentional sabotage. A coach trying to control the narrative by keeping a potential threat to his quarterback plan buried. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If Sanders had been given the same setup as Gabriel or even Flacco, he might have outshined them. And for Stefanski, that would have opened a door he clearly didn't want to walk through. The so-called sabotage game wasn't just another preseason outing, it was a message. A message that no matter what Sanders did, the deck was stacked against him. But the problem with trying to bury a story is simple. Once fans see through it, the narrative spins out of control. And that's exactly what happened next, when the national media turned their spotlight on Cleveland and refused to look away. Their spotlight on Cleveland and refused to look away. For quarterbacks, there's one test that cuts through all the noise: the 2-minute drill. It's football's pressure cooker. No timeouts, the clock ticking down, and the weight of the game resting on your shoulders. Coaches use it to measure composure. Fans use it to judge leadership. And for Shedeur Sanders, this moment could have flipped his entire narrative. Instead, it turned into one of the most controversial chapters of his preseason. The setup was perfect. Late in a preseason game, the Browns had the ball with just under 2 minutes left, trailing by a score. Everyone in the stadium knew what this was: Shedeur's shot. Finally, after weeks of limited reps and stacked odds, here was his chance to run the most important drive in football. The camera zoomed in. Fans held their breath. This was it. Except it never happened. Instead of handing Sanders the keys, Stefanski pulled him. He sent in another quarterback, Dillon Gabriel, to run the drill. The crowd groaned. Even broadcasters on the call couldn't hide their surprise, questioning the decision in real time. "You'd think they'd want to see what Sanders could do here," one analyst muttered. But the decision was final. Sanders was left on the sideline, helmet on, watching someone else seize the opportunity that should have been his. And that's when the controversy exploded. Social media erupted within minutes. Clips of Sanders pacing on the sideline went viral with captions like, "Why draft him if you won't even test him in crunch time?" Fans accused the Browns of deliberately avoiding a situation where Sanders could shine. After all, if he had marched down the field and scored, how could the coaching staff continue to justify burying him on the depth chart? The post-game press conference only fueled the fire. When Stefanski was asked why Sanders wasn't given the 2-minute drill, his explanation was blunt: "We've got a rotation, and tonight wasn't his turn." That answer landed like a brick. A preseason game with no real stakes, a perfect chance to test your rookie quarterback, and the excuse was rotation. For many, it sounded less like strategy and more like avoidance. Analysts piled on. ESPN segments debated whether the Browns were afraid of what Sanders might prove. Former players chimed in, saying a 2-minute drill is exactly the kind of test you give a young quarterback. And fans? They weren't buying Stefanski's excuse. To them, it looked like Sanders was being deliberately shielded from success. The 2-minute drive controversy became more than just a missed opportunity. It became a symbol of the Browns' entire handling of Sanders, cautious to the point of sabotage, dismissive of his talent, and terrified of what might happen if he actually thrived under pressure. Because the truth is simple, if Sanders had been given that drive and succeeded, the conversation around Cleveland's quarterback room would have changed overnight, and maybe that's exactly why it never happened. But the controversy didn't fade. It only grew louder, setting the stage for the national media storm that would soon engulf the Browns. When Kevin Stefanski barked, "Surely you can't be serious," at a reporter, he probably thought he was shutting down a tough question. Instead, he lit the match that set off a firestorm. Within hours, the clip went viral. Not because it was witty, not because it was clever, but because it exposed a head coach on edge, lashing out under the weight of scrutiny. Stefanski has never been the loudest coach in the NFL. His reputation has been built on calm, measured leadership. But in that one press conference, fans saw something different. A man rattled, defensive, and most importantly, hiding something. Reporters smelled blood in the water, and national media outlets pounced. Suddenly, the Browns weren't just dealing with questions about preseason depth charts. They were facing an all-out narrative war over whether their head coach was sabotaging his own rookie quarterback. ESPN dedicated entire segments to the clip. Former players on F-Zone shredded Stefanski's handling of Shedeur Sanders, accusing him of being insecure and overly rigid. The Kelsey brothers went viral on their podcast, with Travis saying flatly, "Give the people what they want, start Shatter." Even casual NFL fans who barely followed the Browns suddenly had an opinion on the matter. And that was Stefanski's worst nightmare. Because once national voices start framing you as the villain, the story is no longer under your control. The narrative wasn't about rookie development anymore. It was about whether Kevin Stefanski had something personal against Shedeur Sanders. Behind the scenes, Browns insiders started leaking little details that didn't help Stefanski's case. Stories circulated that Sanders wasn't getting fair reps in camp. Analysts pulled the numbers, noting how other rookie quarterbacks across the league were getting first-team snaps, while Sanders remained stuck with backups. Every shred of evidence painted Stefanski as the man holding back a potential star. The pressure intensified when Sanders himself began speaking up. His post-game comments about expecting to get that 2-minute drive only to be pulled showed his frustration. He didn't call Stefanski out directly, but his words were pointed. That's a situation every quarterback dreams about. Fans latched onto that. This wasn't just the media stirring the pot. The player himself felt robbed. And then there's ownership. Jimmy Haslam has been notoriously impatient with coaches, and the whispers started almost immediately. If Stefanski fumbles the handling of these quarterbacks, could his seat get hot? For a coach who once won NFL Coach of the Year, that question seemed unthinkable. Now, it's the elephant in the room. Stefanski is caught in a no-win situation of his own making. If he plays Sanders, critics will ask why it took so long. If he continues to hold him back, the outrage only grows. Every press conference, every decision, every snap Sanders doesn't get is another headline waiting to happen. What started as a single sharp remark to a reporter has spiraled into a full-scale PR crisis, and in the NFL, perception is often reality. Right now, the perception is simple. Kevin Stefanski is under fire, and the flames are only getting hotter. The controversy swirling around Shedeur Sanders and Kevin Stefanski isn't just about one quarterback or one preseason game. It's about the identity of the Cleveland Browns, a franchise that's been chasing stability at the game's most important position for decades. Since returning to the league in 1999, the Browns have cycled through more quarterbacks than most fans can count on both hands. Every new draft pick, every trade, every savior under center was supposed to end the curse, and every time, disappointment followed. Now, the team sits at yet another fork in the road. They've got a 40-year-old Joe Flacco as a stopgap, Dylan Gabriel as a developmental project, and Shedeur Sanders, arguably their most intriguing young prospect, stuck at the bottom of the depth chart. On paper, this might look like options. In reality, it feels like indecision. A team can't move forward if it doesn't know who's leading it. And that's where the bigger picture becomes impossible to ignore. The Browns aren't just deciding how to handle Sanders, they're deciding what kind of franchise they want to be. Do they cling to veteran safety nets and conservative coaching decisions? Or do they embrace risk, give young talent a chance, and finally commit to building something for the future? The stakes couldn't be higher. Cleveland owns not only its own draft pick in 2026, but also Jacksonville's first rounder. That means the Browns are perfectly positioned to draft a quarterback again if they want to. Big names like Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik, and even Arch Manning could be on the board. But if they pull that trigger, it means Sanders was never given a fair shot. It means yet another young quarterback will be tossed aside, another name added to the long, painful list of Cleveland what-ifs. This is why the Stefanski drama matters so much. His handling of Sanders isn't just about reps in camp, it's about whether the Browns are finally capable of breaking the cycle that's defined them for 2 decades. If Sanders succeeds, it validates the team's decision to draft him and gives fans hope for the future. If he fails, and fans believe it's because the coach never gave him a chance, the Browns will be back to square one, searching, rebuilding, and apologizing to their loyal but exhausted fan base. What's more, this saga has revealed just how fragile Stefanski's grip on his job really is. The NFL is unforgiving, and perception can change overnight. One bad season, one mishandled quarterback competition, and a coach goes from franchise stabilizer to hot seat candidate. The Browns are playing with fire here because if this all blows up, they'll be searching for both a quarterback and a head coach at the same time. At the heart of it, the bigger picture is clear. This isn't just about Shedeur Sanders. It's about whether the Browns will keep repeating history or finally change their future. And right now, the world is watching to see which path they choose. If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.